Hi, I hope you had a great lunch and thank you for coming back. So, our next presentation will be spearheaded by our state evaluation team at the Pacific Institute for Research and Evaluation, or PIRE, as many of you know them. Marisa Elise at PIRE will be leading the presentation. Marisa is part of the PIRE evaluation team and has been part of the Mexico Community Survey team since joining PIRE in 2018. Ashley Simmons-Rudolph and Dave Curry will also be supporting this presentation. Both are also a part of the PIRE evaluation team. Ashley has over 15 years of experience working on evaluation projects and has been part of the New Mexico Community Survey team since 2019. Dave has over 20 years of experience working on evaluation projects and has been part of the New Mexico Community Survey team since 2019. I'll hand it over to Marisa now.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Tone. I am assuming everyone can see my face big on the screen right now. I appreciate everyone and all of your work that you've put into submitting the New Mexico Community Survey protocols in the last few weeks. We're just so grateful for the opportunity to get to work with you all on that and getting the New Mexico Community Survey implemented this year. As Tone said, I'm Marisa with the PIRE team. I've been communicating with a lot of you around the protocols and getting ready. Also joining me as panelists today, as Tone mentioned, are Dave and Ashley, who are going to help me answer questions, jump in if I miss anything or clarify anything as needed. And not as panelists, but also want to acknowledge the rest of the PIRE team that helps make the magic happen. As you can imagine, the New Mexico Community Survey has a lot of moving parts, and I'm just so grateful for having such a great and supportive team at PIRE to help so that we can be as helpful and supportive for you all. So I will go ahead and get started with the presentation. All right. Okay. So today is a follow-up training, more just kind of overview and helping you all prepare for data collection that will be starting soon. So what we'll be going over today is a lot of overview of things that we did review in that first protocol training that we shared back in January. It was recorded and we posted it on the website. So we'll be kind of doing a refresher of some of those items just so that, you know, it's at the forefront and we all kind of remember some of that information. Also acknowledging that we have lots of new staff at the community level and just all around. And so just the more we can hear things, hopefully it helps us all gain a little more confidence around this, feel a little more confident to get started with data collection this year. So we'll be reviewing some key information, just reviewing some of the changes and in preparation for the implementation of the New Mexico Community Survey. We'll go over recruitment and what, you know, data collection in the field, just some of those key points related to that. Quick sneak peek at data entry and analysis and just some next steps after today. And again, Ashley, Dave, feel free to jump in at any point if you think I'm missing anything. But just as a reminder that for the New Mexico Community Survey, the goal is to collect a reasonably representative sample of adults in the community. We are collecting the New Mexico Community Survey based on protocols mostly online, but there is going to be a little bit of in-person data collection this time around as well, as you know, as communities feel comfortable in doing that.
Oh no, did we lose Marisa?
We did.
Uh-oh, okay. All right, please be patient with us while we get her back online.
Let's give her a minute, Tone, and I can jump in if need be.
All right, sounds good. There she is.
I'm so sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. My internet connection is usually pretty good, but anyways, we will keep rolling. We'll keep rolling forward. Okay. All right. Anyways, maybe that was a cue that this is all stuff we already know. But just again, the New Mexico Community Survey will be happening for 9 weeks from February 28th to April 29th. And just as a refresher kind of reminder of why this survey is very important to our state, to us, to our communities, to everyone involved in prevention, but programs and communities use the results of the New Mexico Community Survey to assess local needs and also track changes over time in those key prevention areas that each community focuses on. OSAP uses it to track changes in ATOD use over time at the state level, as well as those intervening variables that we focus on. State agencies use it to improve and increase prevention services to all New Mexicans. The SCOW, the State Epi Outcomes Work Group, also uses it to monitor and track local progress. We did have a question here of how do you use the data? Feel free to drop in comments in the chat if you want to share, if you feel very passionate about saying how you use the New Mexico Community Survey data. Some quick, this should hopefully look familiar to you all, but just kind of going back to that timeline of, the next few weeks as we get ready to go live with the survey. So we are in this week of February 21st through the 25th, where we are working with you all to finalize your protocols. And at this point, a lot of you have received your final approved protocol. And so it's just going to be kind of following up with any support we can provide to help you get ready to be, to start your data collection efforts on the 28th. And also there are just a few more communities that we are just finalizing, getting those final details ready. But we feel pretty good about where everyone's at. Again, we just really appreciate the work and the effort that you've put, the thoughtfulness that you've put into your protocols this year, especially knowing that things are still uncertain in some ways, but that we're all just trying to work with what we have and just where we're at. The survey will go live online on February 28th. If you don't have an approved protocol by then, you can't start your data collection efforts until you've received your approved protocol. So just a quick note there. The survey will close on April 29th, so that's 9 weeks after the February 28th. Around May 6th is when data files for paper surveys are due. This is for any programs who are planning to collect paper surveys. This applies to you. And we will be providing more information and a training around all of this probably sometime in March. So if you are unclear what this means, if you're doing in-person paper survey collection, don't worry, we'll follow up and we'll get you everything you need. And then just around June, those first few weeks of June, PIRE is working on returning those aggregated data files to local evaluators. Towards the end of the month of June, PIRE is sending our reports to the communities, which are those results. And then July 15th is traditionally when end of year reporting documents are submitted to OSAP. And this is included in here because the New Mexico Community Survey results obviously help with that end of year reporting for programs. All right, so before we launch into some more overview of all of this, we did have some poll questions just to see how awake everyone is after their big lunches. I am hoping that the COOP team can help me out with this. All right, there we go. I see it. So the first question, what is the name of the survey platform we will use for the online New Mexico Community Survey this year? So I'll just give you a countdown of 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, can we see the results? Let's see, Qualtrics, SurveyMonkey, Datum, Alchemer. Wow. Well, this I think is a test of how much we were paying attention in that initial protocol training. No, that's okay. So the correct answer is Alchemer. We will be using Alchemer this year, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So the next question. True or false? The online core survey and the paper survey and the paper core survey are exactly the same. True or false? So we'll give that a second or two. Okay, let's see the answers. All right, it's about half and half. So I can see how that might be a little misleading, but the correct answer is actually false because there are questions on the online core version of the survey that are not for the in-person paper survey use, and that's because of our IRB has only approved for the use of these questions for online administration. All right, next question. How many optional modules were updated this year? This one's a really tricky one. I think this is the more, this is the harder question. This one really tests the memory. Okay, you either know it or you don't. Let's see the answers. All right, can we see the answers for this? Maybe it's slow on my screen. Okay, well, the correct answer is 6. And that one was a tough one, so that's okay. Six of the optional modules had some updates, and I'll briefly cover those. All right, and I think that was the last question of the poll. Okay, well, I can't see anyone or see the chat or anything, so just stop me if I'm wrong about that.
Marisa, you have one more poll.
Oh, okay, yes, yeah, let's do it. Oh yeah, this is such an important question, and I've already said the state like 3 times. So let's see, when does the survey go live? All right, let's see the answer or the answers. All right, okay, it's always alive. I'm glad someone, or it's always live, okay. March 1st, close, but it is February 28th when the survey goes live. Great.
Hey, Marisa, we got a question in the chat that I think we could just make a quick clarification. Summer said, so not everyone is receiving the same survey. And I think she's referring to what you had said about the online and the paper and pencil survey. Do you want to just speak very quickly about a little bit more about how those are different? Like,
yeah, sure. And then of course, Ashley, feel free to kind of supplement what I have to share. But yeah, so the online core survey will have 3 additional questions that ask about methamphetamine and polysubstance use. And those are not for using in person with paper survey because we only have IRB approval to administer that online. So in that sense, it's not exactly the same. Also, as you probably saw when you're filling out your protocol, each county will have different additional modules depending on what that county selected when they submitted their protocol. So the core survey, for the most part, is the exact same. Everyone will see that, except for the only difference is if you are taking it on paper out in the community, it'll have or not have some of those questions. And I hope that's not confusing. Do you have anything to add to that, Dave or Ashley?
nope.
Okay.
Sounds good. Thanks, Marisa.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. Okie dokie. All right, and And then I think I'm just going to kind of try to breeze through these next few slides. They're just kind of refreshers of what we talked about in the protocol training. But also, if you have any questions, yeah, keep sending them to the chat. Feel free to follow up with us after the presentation or after the meeting. So as I mentioned earlier, we're switching to Alchemer for the survey platform. What does this mean for you all in the implementation at the community level? Really, it shouldn't mean anything except just a sleek new look. Just like, with Qualtrics, we'll guide you and help you set it up if you have indicated you'll be using iPads or with in-person data collection. So we'll be working with you and all that. And we'll make sure that you have what you need to do that. The other plug I'll put in here is that just like in previous years, we will give you all an opportunity to test the survey. And this has been very helpful for us in the past, so that you can look at your specific county, make sure we've included the modules that you asked for, and those additional questions that they look right. And if possible, also looking at the Spanish version. That would be very helpful. And I'll give you a little more. I'll go back to that later in the survey as well, or in the presentation. Just quick overview, the core survey, 44 questions. That's including those extra 3 questions that are visible to the online version only. So, and then, all the different modules. We did update, as I said, 6 of those modules, and actually I'll get to that in a sec. But as far as changes to the core survey from last year to this year, there was just some updating of some language and some terminology based on feedback that we got from local evaluators, our SEOW partners. And also we added some employment questions. We also moved a few questions from some of the supplemental modules to the core, so that we can ask those questions statewide. Changes to the supplemental modules included also things like updating terminology, just so that things stay relevant to current events and context. Removing redundancy where we could. As I said, the marijuana module is one of those we pulled 2 items from to the core. Also updated some terminology, added a question about safe storage for youth. In the mental health module, we added back the anxiety question, asked a little more about how a person who requested help was able to get help, and added a new question about family member committing suicide. In the opioid module, we updated some language to remove stigmatizing language. And in the PFS 20 module, that was that was also some of the content that was moved to the core for online only. And also we added a perception of risk question to the PFS 20. Okay, so incentives for, I think I might have, no. Incentives for online data collection. So just as a reminder, PIRE will be doing the online drawing again. So we'll be drawing those 3 winners a week, and 3 winners a week for $100, and then a final grand prize winner for $500. And like last year, we'll put that on our Facebook page. And the online incentives are only available if the participant takes the survey online. So just remember that if any of you indicated you're doing in-person data collection, if you're doing it on an iPad, you have to be online, taking the survey online, connected to internet, to be able to enter the raffle at the end. There is no connection between the survey responses and the information collected then for the drawing. Those 2 are done separately, and participants are only eligible to win the weekly incentive during the week that they completed the survey. Duplicate entries are not allowed. On our end, we removed duplicate entries from our pool.
Marisa, I just wanted to add one thing that I saw in some of the protocols this year. Just to clarify, in the past, I know there's been different ways in which PIRE has given out the incentive. This year, as was the case last year, winners will receive a check from Pyre. It's not a gift card, it's not a gas card, it's not things that has been in the past, but a check comes out from Pyre once we confirm their address.
Yes. Yes. Thanks so much for that, Ashley. Okay. All right. Oh, and courtesy of Ashley, these great pictures to make us smile throughout the presentation. But just take a minute. Are there any questions in the chat, Ashley, Dave, that you feel like we can just address, or should we keep?
Melissa asked a question. I'm going to punt that one over to Dave, so maybe he can look into that to answer at the end of your presentation.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so we'll go ahead and keep moving. All right, recruitment ideas. So you've all had some really awesome ideas in your protocols. We're definitely keeping them in mind to share next time around. I also wanted to take a moment here to remind everyone we do have that MVD letter of support posted on the New Mexico Prevention website. And so it's updated for this year. So if you want to engage your local MVD, the letter is there. An email has been sent out to all the field offices as well. So they'll have a heads up that, you know, they might be approached. And if for some reason you forgot about that, or you didn't drop it into your protocol, just send us an email and we'll update your protocol. That's not an issue. And I'll talk more about that as well, updating the protocol. But yeah, so just kind of reviewing just some of the ways that the community survey has been promoted online, especially when we had to make this big adaptation to online implementation. As far as the statewide recruitment efforts, like last year, Pyre will use social media and advertising to target web savvy participants in the communities. So they'll see ads. I think last year we used places like Walmart, Amazon, things like that. Pyre also has a New Mexico Community Survey Facebook page. If you don't follow it, you should go follow it. We'll place, we do ads through Facebook/Instagram, and we monitor that weekly. That's also where we post those weekly winners that I mentioned earlier. And the other thing is that halfway into our data collection period, we will also start zip code targeting in areas with low response rates. So that also reminds me that like in previous years, Pyre should be able to provide those weekly reports of how many participants we have by county. I know that's been helpful not only to you all kind of to get an idea of where things are, but it's also very helpful to us if you notice something kind of weird happening. So all that to say that as we're moving through the data collection period, don't hesitate to reach out to us if you think something seems off, if you hear any comments about, you know, having problems accessing things, just feel free to send us an email. It's no problem for us to just double check, even if it was, you know, a one-time glitch or something. It's, you know, it's just better for us to double check and kind of be monitoring that anyways. Let's see. Okay. The statewide visual ad, we will, we have the posters again. We will mail, print copies of posters, postcards, and the flyers to you all. We've tallied up what requests you made in your protocol, and we'll be reaching out to you to get a good contact and mailing address for where to send those, just kind of how we did it last year. And also, as you're moving along through data collection, if you find that you need more of something, reach out to us. We'll see what we have and try to figure out how we can help you with that. The other thing to know is that the URL and the QR code change every year. So just make sure you have, you know, if you had some leftover from last year or something, just, you know, get rid of them. Don't, you know, be careful not to mix them up because it is updated information this year.
Marisa, I just wanted to jump into to say that NMCS typically the teeny URL has been NMCS and then the year. But this year, someone else grabbed a conference grabbed the domain name. So for those of you who just changed the year, you'll need to change the order of the year and an MCS as well. It won't be a problem if you throw out all your old stuff, but if you're making any changes,
Yeah.
note that. Also, Marisa, I know that you've ordered the posters. Do we have an anticipated date when PIRE will receive them, to give communities an idea when they might receive them?
No, not at this time, but we will definitely be providing that information as soon as possible.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks, Ashley. All right, so these are just going to be, we wanted to show you all some example of some ads. These are the ads that PIRE has used to push out on Facebook. These were used, I think they're from last year. So, these are available. We saw some great ideas from some communities last year, and just as some examples, this one is from, I believe, Socorro County. This is an ad they created, so we wanted to share it. This one is from San Juan County. And we also, last year, some of you will remember that PIRE partnered with Ricardo Cate to develop images that we use in statewide and local ads. We have the copyright to these ads, and so you are able to use these to help promote the survey in your communities as well. And all of these are found on the NM Prevention website. So if you go to the website, you go under Prevention Program, Evaluation Instruments, New Mexico Community Survey, there is a banner there that says Ads from PIRE and Communities. And you are welcome to use any of these. We've received permission from the communities whose examples we have up here. So if that's helpful for you.
Marisa, a little bit of chatter in the chat. Melissa, that's a great idea about TikTok and Instagram. We recommend that that communities reach out in whichever ways that their communities and that the people that they're trying to recruit, whatever, wherever those people are, to use that to recruit. Cassandra asked if the QR code can be loaded into a downloadable version on the prevention website. And sure, I'm happy to do that. Right now it's on, I've put it every place I can think of, but I didn't think of that. So that's a great idea. If you need it in the meantime, you can also find it on the protocol, which is that first tab above the arrow, on the screen that Marisa is showing right now. But I'll go ahead and get that loaded. It should be loaded in the next 24 hours.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ashley. Yeah, thank you all for that input and those questions. And just to clarify, Ashley mentioned the protocol. So just so you don't get confused, there is the blank protocol template that you all filled out to kind of make your data collection plans. And then there's the protocol handbook, which is actually supposed to be a guide for doing data collection, for implementing the New Mexico Community Survey. It has a lot of very helpful information. So yeah, thanks for reminding me about that, Ashley. Okay, so I'm going to take a little more time on this just because there are some things that we didn't talk about a lot last year, given the context and that we were doing a lot of online data collection, but just to hopefully serve as some helpful reminders and to provide a little bit of guidance for programs who have indicated that they may be doing in-person data collection. So just really important to make sure that we're all on the same page about the guidelines for protecting participant confidentiality. So if you plan to do in-person data collection, and that was included in your protocol and that's been approved, it's really important to remember these key things. So when giving participants paper surveys, just be sure to fully consent individuals. You can use the script example that we shared that is on the website. You have to properly inform participants about what the survey is about, that it's voluntary, that it's anonymous, and the types of question it asks. And it's really good practice that what you say during recruitment should be consistent and the same for every person that you're talking to. So be careful just to, and not, sometimes it's unintentional. I think, you're just, when you're kind of in the recruitment mode, but it's really important that you don't leave out information for some that, you do share with others, that, just try to be consistent. Otherwise, just anything that you can do to avoid, giving a negative impression about, not fully disclosing or anything like that. You want to be consistent and make sure that everyone's hearing, the same amount of information so that they really, truly, properly can consent to taking the survey.
Marisa, can I jump in here
yes.
to say, so I'm the first person at Pyre that reads the comments that people write at the end of the survey when we say, is there anything else you want to tell us? And so we got a lot of comments last year about, well, because we did some recruiting at COVID, testing sites and vaccination sites. And it was like, this has nothing to do with COVID. I thought that this was going to be about something else. And I saw in a couple of the protocols that for in-person data collection, some communities wanted to protect privacy by being kind of vague about what the survey was about. And I just really want to encourage you, and for those specific communities, I think we've reached out to clarify that, but you don't want to say or have your data collectors in the community say, here, this is a survey about youth, right? Because that's not really what it's about. And like Marisa says, we should give them the opportunity to truly consent before they start the survey. So saying, this is a survey about substance misuse in our community is something that's accurate without going into a whole lot of detail that might stigmatize or, that effort or make people feel a certain sort of way. So the trick is just finding that balance there between accuracy and so many words that people walk away.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ashley. And, I'll say it over and over again, as you're getting ready to implement, just feel free to reach out to us, check in if you just kind of want some reassurance, you just want to check in about something, you want some guidance. We are happy to help you through that. The other part is around confidentiality, right? So that's, you want to give participants space to complete the survey. You don't want to hover. These are things that, being out in the communities and in the field, I think we all, it's kind of obvious, you don't want to invade, people's space when they're trying to do something. But also, you want to be around so that you can answer, questions or concerns that could come up. If you're collecting paper surveys, you want to give, people their space to do it. A lot of you in your protocol mentioned, having the manila envelope and a secure box to put them in. Make sure the box is always attended. Just all of those basics of best practices of collecting data. And with that, I'll also add that the protocol handbook that I mentioned earlier that's available online also walks you through all of these steps. So if you don't memorize everything that I'm telling you today, it's okay. Like I said, we will be checking in just to make sure you feel like you have what you need. You can look at the handbook, and Pyre is always happy to meet with you to kind of go over anything if needed. And I know this isn't going to happen in a lot of programs, but those of you that do think you might try, we just want to make sure you have what you need. Okay, so then also after a person has completed the survey, so iPad or paper, just make sure that you have that take-home information to provide them. Don't forget about that. Also available on the website. So with the iPads, same process generally. We saw some good ideas about, wiping them down after everyone uses them. And with the paper, having you know, separated clean or dirty pens, or, you know, you just let people take the pen home, so you don't even have to deal with that. All good things. With the iPad too, you want to make sure you give people, you walk them through the consent the same. You give them all that information. You give them space to complete the survey. You could still keep an eye on them just to make sure you're around to answer any questions. Provide the take-home info. The only difference with the iPad is if you are doing online, you want to make sure you inform the participant about the opportunity to enter the raffle. All right. I think the other thing I wanted to add is just really want to encourage you all to work with your local evaluator to put together your paper surveys. It's been a while. We have new staff. It's just good to have, you know, your team looking at it, making sure, you know, you've got your questions, the module, that you have the Spanish, that, you know, that things aren't cut off or formatted weird, that you're removing those like module headers. So work with your evaluator to prepare. We encourage you to work with your evaluator to prep the materials and get ready for that. All right. Okay. I think I'll move forward unless there are any more questions related to this, Ashley.
There's one. Melissa posed a question in the chat that I think we'll hold, if it's okay, till the end. Something that we'll need more conversation about.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks. All right, and then just an early look at data entry and analysis. So this applies for paper survey collection. So we'll provide a training usually around mid-March for communities collecting paper pencil surveys. The process is PIRE provides a clean data file with all your data combined with the data from the online surveys that were collected for your county. You know, we'll package all that up for you. And then your local evaluator will help you create any additional graphs or tables, fill out your community survey summary report in your finding sheets. So we'll be providing more information about this. And if you have, if you're trying to locate a document, you need to go look at the modules, or, you know, you're getting ready to print. All of this, everything actually should be on the website, on the NM Prevention website. So don't hesitate to go look there for something. With that said, feel free to still double check with us if you're still unsure about something. That's not a problem. We're happy to answer questions, no matter if you think we've already answered it, or, you know, it should be obvious. Like, please don't let any of that stop you from asking questions. This is our job, and our role is to support you in this process. All right, and then just some words about recruitment, just leading up to the launch of the survey next Monday. Some things, you know, have you started working on some drafts to those partners or those coalitions you've identified in your protocol? Have you decided on a social media frequency, kind of a schedule, that plan? It could be helpful to start thinking about that, so you're not trying to do it all kind of in the middle of it all. Have you secured any needed permissions for signs, or you know, if you're doing in-person recruitment or data collection? Just some things to be thinking about in the next few days as you're getting ready. And just a reminder, if you make a significant change to your protocol after it's been approved, for example, you're adding a site or changing an ad, please let PIRE know. We will not be mean about it. This is helpful not only for you know, us making sure that, you know, we're adhering to our IRB, but also we can help you think through things. We can help, you know, we're updating your protocol on our end. We're sharing that back with you. You're able to track over time kind of these things you did, and all these great ideas you might have had in between don't get lost. So it's just really helpful, really beneficial to all of us all the way around. If you just let us know if you need to make a change, it's totally fine. And we'll work with you on that. Let's see. Okay. Let's see the next thing. All right. So again, just the NM Prevention website is another good point of reference if you need to find or track down any information. That's also where the trainings are posted. And as Tone mentioned earlier today, we'll also be posting the recipient meeting recordings on there. So if you need to go back to anything like that as well.
I'll just point out, we love hearing from you. When we're happy to answer your questions. 99% of the questions that we get during data collection can be found in the protocol. So if it's like 11 o'clock at night, or if you're in the field or you need something, we have compiled the frequently asked questions and put them and address them in the protocol. We've really worked to revamp it in the last couple of years, so it's easier to read. It's got a table of contents. And so anyway, just encourage you, if you haven't looked at the protocol in a while or are new, or, just to take a look at it. It's right there on that first bar that you can find on the NM Prevention website.
Thanks, Ashley. The last thing that I'll come back to is how I mentioned earlier, we'll be sending out an email to you probably tomorrow with the link so that you can all go and test the online survey. And like I said, make sure that the modules you selected show up for your county, that your additional questions show up for your county, that those look good, that those were copied in there correctly. And also, if you can test the Spanish version, that's really helpful to us. And if you notice any big kind of glaring things of like, oh yeah, this is definitely going to throw off, someone trying to take the survey, please let us know. As you're testing it, if you hear anything from the community, through the in the middle of the data collection period. And just our contact information. So my email, Dave's email, Ashley's email. But honestly, like if you reach out to anyone on the PIRE team, we all talk. So we'll make sure that we can answer your question as fast as possible and as in the most helpful and supportive way as well. So I'm gonna.
A couple of questions in the chat, Marisa.
All right.
I'm gonna address them in reverse order.
Sounds good.
So Cassandra asked, so are we requiring, or is PIRE requiring masks regardless of state mandates? I'll just remind everyone, this was a dynamic, fluid situation when we wrote this presentation last week. Masks were still mandated. If you could, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it's still a really good public health practice. And so, what we can require is what your state and local areas mandate. That said, we're all representatives of good public health practice, and please wear a mask. If there's extenuating circumstance, maybe reach out to PIRE, and then let's talk about other ways to kind of keep you safe. But I think that it's a good practice for now to plan on wearing a mask. Let me see if any of these comments. I personally would not feel comfortable if someone approached me without. It's still a vital public health practice. Yeah. So I'm cautious because the things that PIRE can require that aren't required in a local and municipality. I don't want to get us into trouble, but I just really do implore you to think about ways to continue to kind of set the bar high for public health practice. Okay.
Actually, can I chime in real quick too?
Please.
I definitely want to emphasize too that if you are doing data collection in tribal communities, some tribal communities still enforce face mask wearing. So I know for the Pueblo of Laguna, where I'm from, they do still have a mask mandate. So just kind of out of respect and being aware of whichever community you're in case you're assisting or you're helping, assisting, you're aware of what the requirements are of the local community is. Like you said, the most important thing to understand as well, and of course safety. Where I think I'm always gonna lean on the public health opinion of encouraging you all to wear masks and stay safe.
I see a lot of comments in the chat in support of that. Again, if this is a problem, or there's an extenuating circumstance where you can't wear a mask, please just reach out to PIRE and let's talk more about that. I'm going to move on to another topic of questions that's asked. So Melissa asked, are there steps in place with oversampling and or targeted recruitment for populations from racial and ethnic groups that have been previously underrepresented in previous years? So I'm going to take a pass at that, and then I'll call on Marisa and Dave. So yes, in the state, so there's several things, Melissa, that are in place. So at the state level, we look to see who is underrepresented, and we make efforts in our marketing materials. Specifically, I can give you an example, like men are underrepresented, young adults are underrepresented. So we specifically reach out and target them through social media buys and through other state level efforts. We encourage communities, and through their protocol, you have to identify underrepresented and underrepresented groups and how you will address their underrepresentation as well. So it's happening at the state level and at the community level. And I feel good that there's a lot of thought that goes into that, because we absolutely do want this to be as good of a picture of the state as we can get. I'll pause for my PIRE colleagues if they'd like to add something there.
I think you covered it, Ashley. In terms of racial ethnic groups, which was specifically mentioned, with the online surveying, we definitely have had a greater issue recruiting or getting proportionate representation from Hispanic, Spanish-speaking population, and we definitely have taken steps to try to address that. But that's the thing that stands out the absolute most in terms of those racial and ethnic demographic groupings. But I think that, like Ashley noted, is one of many things that we look at, including the sex gender breakdowns, et cetera, and try to take steps to try to get a solid sample if we can't fully resolve the underrepresentation.
Another thing I'll amplify that Marisa mentioned in one of the slides is that we do zip code targeting, and we work with the OSAP funded communities. So if by region or location, and that can of course be, associated with different racial, socioeconomic kinds of things as well. And so about halfway through the survey, we're monitoring it all the time, but about halfway through, we take active attempts at the state level to help communities with, state level resources to identify those communities and to tweak or to, start new ad efforts that are targeted for those communities. We also monitor social media daily to see how our efforts are doing and what we need to do, what we need to change.
I always get so happy when I see a New Mexico Community Survey ad. I just want to say thank you to Marisa, Ashley, and Dave for your presentation and for your support preparing all our recipients for the New Mexico Community Survey data collection. Thank you to all the prevention specialists and evaluators who collect surveys and support getting this valuable data. We are now going to take a break. When we come back, Ashley Campbell and Haley Peterson from the New Mexico Department of Health will be presenting on the 2020 substance use involved deaths in New Mexico data. And we will see you back here for that presentation at 2:15. So take a break, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you all.
I'm a little early. I'm coming back. If you guys are on, back on Zoom, I just want to let you know that we are going to have Tanya Henderson join us again, and she will do some stretches with us again for this afternoon. So hang on, and so you got less than a minute, but go run and grab some water, go grab a quick snack if you need it, and come right back. So thanks. And we are back. Have you guys seen Wayne's World? I love when he do the countdown and he's like, sorry, I make myself laugh. Okay, so let's see. All right, so welcome back, everyone. There she is. Awesome. Thank you, Tanya. Can you?
Hi, thanks again. I'll make this really quick so before we have our next presenters go in. So hi everyone, if you guys don't know me, I'm Tanya Henderson. I'm with Coop Consulting. I'm just gonna go and do some really quick desk stretches. So if you guys remember, we just start off with our wrists, just, do a couple of arm circles, just go backwards, clockwise, counterclockwise. It's all good. And then we're just gonna go ahead and start moving our shoulders, just like get loose, just go back again, and go forward. And then we're gonna move into some neck stretches. So go ahead, just go to your right, just slightly. If you want a little bit of pressure, just pull your hand down. And then move to the other side, very gently, very smooth. Don't forget to breathe in between the stretches. Nothing too crazy. And then we're gonna do something a little bit more different. Like, we're gonna get a little spicy. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our hands, and if you're in a desk and you're sitting down, just kind of slightly put yourself in the corner so you kind of like twist your back or your lower back a little bit. Yeah. Don't go too much. And then we're just gonna go ahead and go into the other side. Just real quick, real small, and then just come straight forward to the back. Interlock your fingers and just stretch straight out. Perfect. And let's just bring it up, straight back. Just feel a slight stretch. If you want to, you can gently move side to side. Very easy, very simple. And then go ahead and bring it down. All right, hopefully everyone's all warmed up, and welcome to our next presenters. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Tanya. Oh, yes, that feels good. Thank you. Our next presenters are from let me start again. Our next presenters are from New Mexico Department of Health. They are a longtime partner of OSAP. We want to acknowledge how wonderful New Mexico Department of Health has been these past years working on the pandemic-related issues while continuing to provide OSAP and OSAP providers support and data. So thank you so much. Their work is greatly appreciated and has incredible value for prevention programs. We are grateful today for Alicia and Haley's time and for all the work that they did to prepare this data for us today. I want to give a little introduction. Ashley works for the New Mexico Department of Health and started in the role as the drug overdose epidemiologist earlier this month. She was a substance abuse epi since October of 2020. Before that, she was in Houston, Texas, and had worked in various roles in substance use treatment. Haley Peterson is the drug overdose morbidity epidemiologist in the substance use epidemiology section of the New Mexico Department of Health and has been with this section for over 3 years. Before I hand it over to them, I want to acknowledge that data drives our decisions and our work, and this helps inform our practice in addressing these issues. Please take a moment to excuse yourself if necessary. With that, I'll hand it over to Alicia and Haley.
There we go. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Alicia Campbell. I'm with the Department of Health. Just kind of real quick, I am the drug overdose epidemiologist. And today, Haley and I are going to be doing a presentation on, it's going to be hospital visits and substance use related deaths in New Mexico for 2020. So Haley's going to be doing the syndromic surveillance and overdose visits, and I'll do overdose deaths, naloxone distribution, and a little alcohol-related deaths. So a lot happened in 2020. Let's just go ahead and talk about that real quick. And there's a lot of delays that happened, and one of them was delays in data. And so the final mortality data, we just got the final data maybe earlier this month, maybe late last month. So a lot of the resources that would be available to you guys is not available currently right now, but we are in the process of getting that together online. It's going to take a little while. Those are things like the EPI profile and IBIS, but we are working on it. So just kind of bear with us. We normally get that stuff way earlier in the year, and unfortunately we just, with everything else, it's just delayed. So let's go to the next slide, please. So this is a slide that Jim Davis actually put together, and we have really liked it. So this is years of potential lives lost. And just want to talk about how this was pulled from IBIS, and it does have 2020 data in there. And so it is, if you look at the lines that are in orange, that makes up more than half of the years of lives lost. And that top line is unintentional deaths. And what lives in there are things such as, overdose deaths, chronic illness due to substance use, acute injury due to substance misuse, a lot of homicides where substance misuse it occurs, car accidents, and other things like that too. And also down at the bottom, you'll see like septicemia. That's also where substance misuse is involved. So when we're looking at this, we're looking at years where average years where a person would have lived had they not died prematurely. So this is really kind of relevant to why this type of work is important. So this is just a slide that we have really liked to show whenever we are presenting recently, because it really highlights why we do the work that we do. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Haley, where she is going to talk about syndromic surveillance. And I will pick up later on.
Thanks, Alicia. So we can go to the next slide. So I'll be talking about emergency department syndromic surveillance. I'm Haley Peterson. If you all don't know me, we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So a few things about syndromic surveillance is that it wasn't originally intended for infectious disease surveillance, but in recent years, it's been utilized to monitor other conditions, including non-fatal drug overdose. So we're looking specifically at emergency department visits related to non-fatal drug overdose. This has the advantage of providing more timely data. So we used to rely on, there's what's called the annual ED file, and that we would have to wait for the year to close out, and then it would take several months, just sort of like with our death data, it would take several months for it to be fully closed out, and then we would finally have the data from the previous year. So syndromic surveillance allows us to look at these things quicker. The way it works in our program is that we get a quarterly data set from the health systems EPI program. They are another program at DOH. They're sort of the stewards of the data. So they send us the data quarterly. I usually get it about a month or two after the quarter ends. And then I run it through a program to try to deduplicate the data as best as possible and sort of organize it in a way that makes it easier to look at drug overdose specifically. There are some caveats to consider when we're looking at these data. So there is some variability in the number of facilities reporting in. So that can affect the number of ED visits in total, and also affects maybe what areas of are showing up in the data set. So that's important to keep in mind when we look at these data. It also doesn't include federal or IHS facilities. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And then this is intended to provide a rough estimate of disease burden rather than an exact measure. So that's, again, important to keep in mind that when we're looking at counts, the way that it works in our program, we've done our best to deduplicate it, but we still want to consider it more of an estimate rather than an exact count. And then toxicology is not consistently performed. So if you all are familiar with the death data, and Alicia will be presenting that in just a little bit, we're very confident in our toxicology on those deaths. Whereas with the emergency department visits, there can be variability. So some facilities might have everyone that comes over for a drug overdose. They might have everybody do toxicology of some sort, whether it's a blood sample or a urine sample. There might be some facilities that don't. They might be relying on the patient reporting what they used. They could be relying on naloxone having been effective, which would indicate an opioid overdose. And so we're relying on how the visit was coded. So those ICD codes that come along with the visit that tell us what the diagnosis was. So say a facility, naloxone worked, maybe they didn't get a chance to talk to the patient for some reason. So they assume it's an opioid overdose, but perhaps had they been able to talk with the patient or had they run a urine drug screen, maybe they would have found out it was opioids and amphetamines. So there can be some variability there. So that's one thing to also keep in mind, is that we're really relying heavily on the diagnosis codes associated with the visit. All right, next slide. So this is a slide showing the number of hospitals reporting in to the emergency department syndromic surveillance data system by quarter. And I point this out again because with the variability that can affect our numbers. So we see it get pretty stable by the third quarter of 2019 with about 38 facilities reporting in. And I don't know the total number of facilities in New Mexico off the top of my head, but I know that 38 facilities is pretty close to the total. Next slide, please. So this slide is looking at the total all-cause ED visits by month in New Mexico. So this is going from July 2016 to September of 2021. And all-cause ED visits means we're looking at, this is heart attacks or a stroke or drug overdose or an alcohol-related ED visit. So this is for all causes. And this is to give you a sense of the denominator that we're looking at. So overall, what was the total number of ED visits that month? And one data call out that I have there is in April 2020, we saw a significant dip in emergency department visits. And of course, that was when we initially went into lockdown for COVID. And then the blue vertical line I have here on the graph, you'll see it on all the following graphs as well. That's to indicate when the third quarter of 2019 started and we had more stability in the number of facilities reporting in. So this gives you sort of an idea of, the jump you're seeing in the data after that point is not necessarily because there was more emergency department utilization in the third quarter of 2019, but we had 3 additional facilities from the previous quarter reporting in, which greatly increased the number of visits that we were seeing. Next slide, please. So now we're looking at drug overdose related emergency department visits by month. And when we're talking about drug overdose visits, again, we're going based off the ICD-10 code. And the codes I've included are drug overdose due to opioids, amphetamines, benzodiazepines, or cocaine. And with this trend line, I have those 2 call outs there in July of 2020 and June of 2021, because those are sort of our 2 peaks. So we see peaks happening in the summertime there. And of course, all these data are also during the pandemic. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And next slide. And this slide is showing us our rate. So when we look at Emergency department visits, it's very common to use the total number of emergency department visits as our denominator. So we're doing the number of drug overdose emergency department visits per 10,000 emergency department visits. That's typically how it's reported out. And so this, again, I've pointed out that April 2020 is when you see a significant peak, but it's important to keep in mind because our denominator drops so significantly because people, we're trying to avoid the emergency department at the start of lockdown and at the start of the pandemic. We saw a significant decrease in the denominator. So when you consider that, drug overdose might be something that people may have still been going to the emergency department for regardless, that's going to make it a greater proportion of the overall emergency department visits. So that's why you see that peak there. All right, and I think that wraps up my slide, so I'll pass it back to Alicia.
All right, yes, that's back to me. Hello, everyone. Okay, so let's go to the first slide. So some of these slides you may have seen already at the SCOW last week. There are some additional ones in here that we have shown internally. So this slide shows 2019, and I'm using it just as a reference for you guys to kind of get an idea of what happened from 2019 to 2020, just to show the change. So it's a visual reference. It's the nationwide overdose death increase through to 2020. So in 2019, there were about 5 states that had an overdose rate greater than 35 per 100,000 population, and it was primarily here in the Northeast. And majority of the states fell somewhere between a rate of 10 to 20 per 100,000 population. Next slide, please. And when we moved into 2020, so the data shows that about 14 states, and not everyone has closed yet, so they're estimated to have higher than a rate of 35 or greater per 100,000 population, and that does include New Mexico. So in 1 year, we see that where a majority of the states had an overdose death rate that fell somewhere between 10 and 20 per 100,000 population, that this has now increased to the majority of the states to somewhere between 20 to 35. And that actually, when I looked, 4 to 5 of the states were somewhere greater than 40, a rate greater than 40 per 100,000 population, and pretty much every state had a higher rate. I think one maybe was the same or close to the same. And it's pretty important to note here that New Mexico is probably going to be in the top 10, some perhaps maybe 9th or 10th for death rates again in 2020. Last year we were 12th, or 2019 we were 12th. Next slide. So here we are looking at an increase over time from New Mexico in comparison to the United States. 30 years ago, New Mexico was about double the US rate, and both the state and New Mexico have steadily increased. New Mexico is showing some higher increases over the years, but typically as the national rate increased, so does New Mexico. And in 2020, there was a significant increase for both. It's difficult to identify the exact nature, but with the increase in fentanyl nationwide, this is certainly a contributing factor. So we're not really sure if this is necessarily related to the pandemic or if it's fentanyl, but there was an increase in both. So next slide. And, I do go back real quick. I just want to say this. So I think the nationwide rate increased about 30% for the year, and we increased 32%. So that's something really important to note. So next slide. So this slide shows, it's a comparison from 2015 to 2020, where the most common drugs in an overdose death. And you can see that, 5 years ago, where, fentanyl was maybe, 10th as a leading drug. And now it's second. And, as we're moving into 2021, it is probably going to surpass, and as we move further into this, you'll see that it is surpassing methamphetamine. But it is interesting to look at this over the last 5 years, where we see methamphetamine. I mean, everything has increased, but there's been some major increases in the last 5 years for methamphetamine, fentanyl. Heroin was the leading cause 5 years ago, and it has increased, but not nearly as significantly as methamphetamine and fentanyl. So, next slide. All right, so this is a slide that most of us have seen before. This is the running totals, and it's a 12-month running total. And so it's really important to note here that the blue area is going to be provisional. So, but as you can see, the increases in methamphetamine were the driving forces for the overdoses for the last couple of years, and it's continued into 2021. We also want to note that, even though this is provisional, we do see that this is definitely increasing. And as you can see, the red line does show it's surpassing methamphetamine, like I was just saying. There's also a declining in prescription opioids, and heroin seems to be decreasing, and cocaine and benzodiazepines are remaining pretty consistent. Next slide. Okay, so this is a slide that wasn't in the last one. So this is a bar graph that shows the percent of deaths that involve fentanyl. It was slowly increasing, and in 2019, this doubled. So we do know that it showed up in, about 2019 was whenever we saw that it started really kind of taking over, I guess we should say. And, it doubled in 2019, and then in 2020, it doubled again. And in 2021, we're seeing that it's going to be higher. It's going to be significantly higher again. So next slide. And this is where I was just saying that it looks like prescription opioids are decreasing. So this shows a percentage of deaths that are non-fentanyl prescription opioids. And since 2016, we see that they are declining. So I'd assume this is due to the increased prescription drug monitoring program. So it's nice to see these kind of interventions are working. Next slide. Okay, so this is something I threw together recently. I saw this on another state's dashboard. They didn't have the other years on it, but it had the monthly totals. And Haley has the monthly totals for the overdose ED visits, and the seasonality is pretty similar when you look at the summer months, where OD visits and OD deaths seem to be much higher in summer months. So it gives us an interesting way to look at trends that occur. So the blue bars are the deaths that occurred in 2020. And as you can see, there was an increase after the lockdowns in March. However, these increases throughout the year are not necessarily uncommon. So seasonality, summer appears to be the months where we see more overdose deaths. The orange line is from 2019, and the red line is provisional for 2021. So as you can see, the number of deaths are expected to be higher in 2021. And after a 32% increase, like I just said, for 2020, this is kind of alarming. And after what we have seen in the previous slides, it's notable that fentanyl is the leading cause for this increase. So, next slide. So this is a county map with the number of deaths in orange and the rates in blue. And this came up in another meeting I was in last week, and we pulled this slide up, and just to kind of give an example of a couple of things. First, the state rate for 2020 is 39.7. So starting at about Taos over to the right, so about somewhere like high middle, just so that's basically about half the counties in the state are at or higher than the state rate for overdose deaths. Also, something to note here, so Catron, which is the highest rate in blue, had I think it was like 2 deaths. but they have such low population that this makes their rates jump really high. So whereas Bernalillo has the highest count in orange, they're not, they're the count, they don't have the highest rate because they have such a high population. So this is a really great example of how, looking at rates and counts and how important it is to keep that in mind whenever you're looking at those two things. Next slide. So demographics, when we're looking at certain demographics for overdose deaths, this is age and sex. So highlighting some of this, here we have the death rates for males and females across different age groups. And to keep it simple, 2020 is the only year shown on here. And this data reflects that the age group between 35 and 44 is the age group that had the highest rate of overdose deaths overall in 2020. And it's clear that men are impacted more than women in all age groups, with the exception of 75 to 84-year-olds. So next slide. And this came up in another meeting also. So I already had this slide in this presentation, but I went ahead and showed it in there. But what's really important here is that even though 35 to 44 had remained the age group with the highest prevalence of overdose deaths, it looks like in 2020 that the 25 to 34 age group had a pretty significant increase in overdose deaths in 2020, and a greater increase than that of 35 to 44-year-olds. Even though they're lower than them, they still had a larger increase in 2020. Next slide. Okay, this is race ethnicity over time. So when we stratified the data by race, it allowed us to see the change within each age group, as opposed to just looking at the overall single year and identifying changing rates. So by doing this, we were able to see that the Black population had a significant increase in overdose deaths in 2020. This is in line with what is happening nationwide. So it's clear that each ethnic group experienced increases in overdose death rates in 2020. But if you look at the Black population in comparison to other ethnic groups, out of the last 5 years, there's been a greater impact in overdose deaths there. This chart shows clearly that by 2020, the overdose deaths within the Black population had increased, I think it was by 130%. And the death rate was almost double that of Hispanics, which had the largest death rate in overdose deaths in the previous year. So something is happening here in New Mexico, but it seems to be happening nationwide as well. Next slide. Okay, so this graph shows overdose deaths by regions in New Mexico since 2016. So each region had increases in 2020. Although if you look at this, the metro and the northeast regions had the greatest increases in overdose deaths. So this is pretty significant when we're looking at, potential areas for prevention and other efforts to strengthen and increase efforts. So I thought that this was really important to include in here as well. So next slide, please. All right, there's a lot of discussion about polysubstance use, and there are many instances where more than one substance is identified in an overdose death, and Haley was talking about that too. And so every time that there is something noted that there's more than one substance, we record that. And so these are, we had 801 overdose deaths in 2020. And if you try to add these all up from, in all of them, they're not going to total 801 because we have multiple substances. But for methamphetamine, there was 318 overall. And if you look at this chart, 318 is noted at the bottom right. You'll see where it says total. And the way that this chart kind of works, so looking at this if you look at the left column, it starts with identifying, it says with second drug. Well, first it says none. And then it says, and if you look to the right, it says 119. So that would be methamphetamine on its own. So methamphetamine on its own was 119 overdose deaths. And then if you look below that, it's methamphetamine with heroin. So that's methamphetamine with heroin as the second substance. There was 40 of those. But then methamphetamine with heroin and cocaine. So with the third substance, that's 10. And then methamphetamine with heroin and then fentanyl would be another third substance. So it's not with cocaine and fentanyl. So it's just an additional third substance. It's 42. So this just gives you a visual of how to look at this to get an idea about polysubstance. And something really relevant here that we wanted to include was alcohol. So if you go all the way over to the end, to the far right, you see where we've included alcohol in here as well. So in that first line, you see, methamphetamine alone. And then if you go all the way over to the right, 5% of those people had alcohol in their system as well. So this chart really highlights the polysubstance use in New Mexico. And next slide. So since meth and fentanyl are the two driving the overdose deaths in 2020, go back. Since methamphetamine and fentanyl are driving the overdose deaths in 2020, I included the same visual for fentanyl. I won't go over it in as much detail. I know that you guys will be getting a copy of this, so I figured that I would include this in case you wanted to be able to look at it and have more information. Obviously, we will be able to provide you more. We are trying to build a polysubstance section in the profile. It is not complete yet, but we are working on building one. So that is something to be looking for. But yes, earlier, just like I said, there was, I think I said this, I know I said it in the last one. I know I said it was really close between methamphetamine and fentanyl. There was 318 methamphetamine deaths and 311 fentanyl. So it was really close. And it looks like for 2021 that fentanyl is going to surpass that. So it's going to be interesting to see what is happening with fentanyl in New Mexico and nationwide. And next slide. So just a couple things to note here. There was 801 deaths in New Mexico compared to 605 in 2019. The death rate was 39.7 in 2020 compared to 26.2 in 2019. It was driven by the illicit substances, fentanyl, methamphetamines. Prescription opioids are decreasing. It appears that there's a seasonality to overdose deaths, being summer. More than half of the counties in New Mexico have death rates equal to or higher than the state rate. Males between 35 and 44 had the largest rate of overdose deaths. And there was the largest increase between 25 and 34-year-olds. And Blacks have shown an extremely significant increase in overdose deaths. Next slide. All right, so now we're going to talk about some naloxone distribution. Next slide. All right, this first graph shows the distribution of naloxone throughout New Mexico since 2015. So as you can see, there was a steady increase in distribution through 2019, which pretty much doubled each year. And in 2020, there was about a 20% decrease from the previous year. And in 2021, we don't have the final data. I should have that sometime in March. But there has been what looks like so far about a 10% increase based off of what I already have. So it looks like it's increasing back up. And I think that's about it, what I have on this slide. So next slide. So this one looks kind of busy, but I wanted to kind of show it by quarters just to kind of get an idea of what we were looking at. with other stuff and to talk a little bit about how, so we have 3 sources that we get the data from. And, we get it from, BHSD, we get it from Medicaid claims, and we get it from the harm reduction programs at DOH. And, Medicaid claims are about 50% of it, which I'll show that in a different slide. But, Medicaid has really kind of taken off, but there was a decline in reported distribution starting in Q2 of 2020, which makes sense because that's when the pandemic happened, and it was harder to get, I guess, be in contact or to meet up with people to distribute naloxone. Next slide. So these are the pie charts. So this slide, it's just some pie charts that I put together, which it just provides a better visual of the distribution from each source. In 2019, the distribution was more equal among the 3 sources. However, in 2020, Medicaid claims for naloxone was right above 50%, and the naloxone distributed throughout the state. And so far in 2021, Medicaid claims still have the highest percentage of naloxone distribution. With HSD, it has increased slightly since 2020. Next slide. So one of the things that I thought was really important to talk about too, because whenever we distribute naloxone, it's so that people will, do reversals within the community. So reported reversals have been steadily increasing, and with a high in 2019 with 4,144. And in 2020, there was a decrease just under 30%. In 2021, there's been about a 10% increase here too, which, is just what I had said has been for distribution of naloxone also. So something to think about here is that about 95% of the reversals that I get reported to me are provided from the harm reduction program. And they only dispense about 25% of the naloxone. So, my hope is that there's more being, there's more occurring in the community that are being reported to us. So my guess is, the more that we saturate the community with naloxone, the more lives that are being saved. And hopefully we'll be able to find additional ways to collect data on reversals within the community. Next slide, please. And this is a slide that I really like because it shows that as the trend lines for these 2 things are pretty much identical. The distribution and the reversals seem to mimic each other. So I like the idea of the more that we put out, the more reversal information that we get. So the more lives are being saved. Next slide. So because we were talking about substance use related deaths, I wanted to throw in some alcohol related deaths in here. These slides were put together by Annalise, which I'm sure she is on this call as well. And if there's questions about these slides, I'm sure she'll be able to field some answers. Her contact information is on the end slide as well. So I am going to just talk about a few of them. I think there's 3. So I did want to make sure I added these in here. And next slide. All right, so alcohol-related deaths by cause. So chronic heavy drinking, and it contributes to a number of diseases, including like cirrhosis, liver cancer, and other chronic liver diseases. And we've seen, that males are more at risk than females for alcohol-related chronic disease deaths, and acute related injury deaths are associated with like binge drinking, which is, having 5 or more drinks and on one occasion for men and 4 or more drinks for women. And acute injury is related to things such as like motor vehicle fatalities, homicides, and suicides. And once again, like males are more at risk for acute injury related alcohol death when compared to women. And in 2020, it looks like, it's continued to always be chronic conditions over acute conditions. And in 2020, that did not change, that remained the same, that chronic conditions seem to be leading the cause of cause-related deaths. Next slide. Okay, by sex. So like I was just saying, that we see that the prevalence of men experiencing alcohol-related deaths is definitely higher than women. But as you can see in 2020 and over the years, it seems to have more than doubled that of women, and it's been increasing more than that of women for the last 5 years. So next slide. And this slide is showing the rate of alcohol-involved deaths in New Mexico since 2010, which has close to doubled since 2010, as a matter of fact. And we see that the increase from 2019 to 2020 was pretty significant. Seeing that we have included alcohol in how we show the polysubstance use and the polysubstance use deaths earlier, I thought it was pretty important to include these as part of this presentation. It definitely is impacting, the use of other substances as well. So, and I think that is it. These are the members of our team. If you were on the SCOW, you got to meet Jessica as well, and most everyone has met Jim and Annalise in previous presentations. And please feel free to reach out to any of us directly. We are more than happy to answer any questions. And that, I believe, is it.
Thank you, Alicia. We did have some questions come through the chat. I was waiting. So let's see. Bernie mentioned, can we look at the graph post influx of intramuscular IMF in the street drug market?
I'm guessing that's illicitly manufactured fentanyl. Okay, yeah. Illicitly manufactured fentanyl.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I wonder if that came in during the emergency department visit slides. So I'll just talk about it. It would be hard to separate that out. It's tough since the stability of the number of facilities reporting also happened in the third quarter of 2019. From what I recall, November 2019. So sort of like that fall time of 2019 is when we got more and more reports from you all out in the community about hearing from users of the harm reduction program, reporting seeing fentanyl more and more often. And then of course, in the death data, we also see it start to take off sort of at that same time period. So I think it'd be a little bit difficult to determine if the increases are because we're seeing an increase in the number of facilities reporting in versus just an increase in fentanyl overdose visits. The other complicating factor in the emergency department data that's a bit unfortunate is that I suspect that, well, there could be multiple things going on. So sometimes I think certain overdose visits get coded just as an opioid overdose, maybe because they're not doing that urine drug screen again, or so they're just going off of naloxone working, or because I see a significant number of opioid overdose visits, but I don't see a significant numbers of fentanyl overdose visits. And the other thing to consider is that for a while, fentanyl was part of this ICD-10 code that was for synthetic narcotics. So it was for tramadol/fentanyl. It could be used for either. And then only in, gosh, I think October of 2020, I believe, it finally got its own ICD-10 code. So I've been sort of looking at that over time. It's increased, but it's, again, that's hard to say. Is it an increase in the facilities using that special diagnosis code, or is it actually following the trends? that we're seeing out in the community. And then another thing that I often wonder about is, because we know that fentanyl is so strong, sometimes I wonder if, unfortunately, those folks aren't actually making it to the emergency department, if they unfortunately pass away. So I don't know. I think there's a number of things that could be going on in the data, and it's a bit hard to disentangle all of that.
Thank you, Haley. We also have an additional question for Bernie. Do you have info on whether the meth OD deaths were strokes, MIs, etc.?
So I think, Bernie, are you asking like if we're able to look at the other causes of death for methamphetamine related deaths to see if there's strokes or heart attacks or that sort of thing? I'm guessing.
Yes.
And I don't know, that might be, Alicia, you would probably know better than I would at this point, but that might also be something we need to ask Jim about.
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that because, I mean, I've only been in this in this role for about 3 weeks or 2 weeks as of yesterday, and so I haven't been able to start doing everything yet. But I can definitely ask Jim if we can look at other causes of death to see if we can see if it's, I know with overamping and whatever to see, but I know that what we look at are the toxicology reports. So I guess what you're asking, if it's coded as an overdose, or if it's not coded as an overdose, if we see if in the toxicology report, if it has any kind of substance in it, are we getting notified of that? Is that what you're asking? I guess the question would kind of be, are they even running anything else? If there's a stroke, are they checking?
Bernie put, of the 119 meth only, how many were strokes, heart attack, hypertensive crisis?
Okay.
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind with our death data, part of the reason why we're so confident in the toxicology and the substances involved is that it's called any unattended death. So unattended means like there wasn't a medical person there to determine what the cause was. Any unattended death is handled by our central office of the medical investigator. So that is one fortunate thing of our system in New Mexico, is that all of those deaths get toxicology performed. We've set it up that way because of the significant problems here. And then we're also, so not every state has a centralized system like that. So not every state is able to, they don't necessarily investigate their deaths that way. It really varies state by state, but because we have that centralized system, any unattended death does get toxicology performed.
Okay, Bernie was just specifying, but only if it's easy, and he was just curious. And he said, thank you. There was some additional questions. Melissa, is it possible to create a slide that maps alcohol death rates over time as well as the drug overdose death rates?
So put them together?
I'm assuming so.
And one thing to keep in mind too with the maps, I mean, it's not really over time necessarily, but we do have the maps, the county level maps in the profile, of course, which it covers a 5-year period. So it's not showing you change over time, but yeah, that's a good spot to look at the maps.
There's another question of, could you figure a rate of OD overdose emergency department visits over time by drug involved that will account for the increase in reporting hospitals?
Yeah, so I could potentially look at the data. It would be challenging, but I could try to look at it by facility to see, or maybe focus on a couple facilities to see what the changes are over time. I do So I didn't show it today, but I just showed total drug overdose visits today because I knew that we had a lot of good death data to report on. But I am able to break it out by code. So like I do have, opioid overdose deaths separated out, or not deaths, sorry, emergency department visits. So I can look at that over time, of course, but I don't necessarily have that by facility just yet, but that is something I could work on, of course.
Okay. Jay has a question. Do you get data on all overdoses that are Native American as the listed race?
I mean, I know that what we get, whatever I get from the vital records, I mean, is what I get. So that's all I have to go off of. So if there's something that happens that doesn't get reported, I mean, I just get what I get from vital records is all I know. So, I mean, I don't know if that means, honestly, I don't know what happens between Pueblos and vital records. So I'm not sure of that relationship there, but that is something that I can check on. I'm not from New Mexico, so I don't know about that relationship. But I can follow up with Jem, and Jay, I can follow up with you.
Okay. All right. Shelley also mentioned in order to tease out that an increase is due to the drug and not number of reporting hospitals. So she had asked about the if you could figure out the rate of overdose ED visits over time.
Yeah. And that's one thing I found interesting, because I have had I had a partner from southern New Mexico that told me about that anecdotally they had heard of an increase in overdose events in the younger population. And unfortunately, when I went to look at the data by county, I wasn't seeing anything that significant. So again, I don't know if that's because maybe the facility that those folks ended up at weren't in the data set, or it's just hard to know what may have happened there.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Haley. This data reflects the reality of our work and the challenges community prevention specialists and community members have faced during the pandemic and in the face of many challenges across our state. I just want to say, while we are data driven in our work, we want to acknowledge that these numbers, these data represent people whose lives we value, people who brought meaning and joy to their families, friends, and community. I'm sure we share that sentiment, and that's why we do what we do. Of course, any death is taken to as a something we want to work towards preventing with the work that we're doing. So I appreciate all the data you collect for us, all the data you share with us. It comes through and helps out our communities and in their work that they're doing in their communities. So thank you so much. I want to be able to wrap up our day. I want to mention tomorrow's breakout sessions will begin at 10 a.m. Yay! Breakouts will be held in meeting mode. So please note that when you join, we will be able to hear you and see you on camera. Oh, be camera ready, everybody. There is one link to join for tomorrow. And from there, we will provide instructions on how to join the various breakouts. We hope that the breakouts will provide relevant and thought-provoking information and provide the opportunity for prevention specialists to connect. Many of this year's breakouts were selected based off of feedback from the OSAP recipient meeting feedback survey in August. Thank you for suggesting topics that are of the most value to your work, and please continue to share your feedback. I'm really looking forward to this year to hear from all of you about how, what would you like to see in the future for our breakouts for particular topic areas. I really, you know, if you want to volunteer, if you want to also lead a presentation, I would greatly appreciate that. So I just want to throw that out there. Let's see. Let me see. Okay, before we sign off, I want us to revisit the initial question. So the initial question I gave you guys at the beginning is, what is the best part of your job? If you feel comfortable sharing your thoughts, please type them into the chat or raise your hand to be unmuted. So I'm gonna pick, if we don't see any hands raised, I'm gonna say, let me see. Raquel says, what I love most about my job is listening and learning from community members that have a world of knowledge about this topic. Beautiful. Building relationships. Thank you, Joanna. Jenny, serving the community. Meredith, working with wonderful people, working with community. Diversity of the work and community. Working with schools, working with community members and sharing experiences. Every day is something new. I love working with my team and community. The data we collect is mind-opening too. Thank you and have a great afternoon. Meeting new friends, yes. I think that's why I miss our OSAP recipient meetings in person, because I think every meeting you would meet someone new. Let's see. Learning about my community through the people who live here and experience it. Beautiful. The best part of my job is I get to work with the community and provide life-saving medication. Thank you. Giving back to our community and the great outcomes. Supporting my team in their professional and personal development to do such good work in the community. Being able to use my love of learning and sharing, creating learning opportunities. Thank you, Paula. Knowing we are making a difference. The passion that all of our team members have for this work, definitely. Building trust between state and tribes. Best part of my job, working to make an environmental change for the community where my family grew, giving back to the people I love so much. Thank you, Valerie. Helping community members and working with old and new friends. Nice, Felix. Brianna, working with the community and youth, learning and sharing cultural and community knowledge. These are beautiful, everyone. Thank you so much for sharing. I look forward to seeing all of you on screen tomorrow. Thank you, everyone, for sharing the best part of your job. You are all doing an amazing service to our state. We are honored to work with all of you. And so that brings our webinar to a close for today. And we'll see you all tomorrow at 10 a.m. Thank you.